Hi, welcome to Building SaaS with Python and Django. My name is Matt Lehman. I am the streamer here, and we work on a Django web application, specifically a homeschooling app that I'm building for my family, and I walk you through all of the process of building out that application. The point is to go over how to do a Django application, or at least my method of doing it, and hopefully learn something along the way. Tonight we're going to continue on the app, and I've got a feature that I've been trying to build out to handle school breaks in the application, and I'm getting down to how to display it, and I had some basic ideas in mind, but I got a little ambitious over the week and started working on a calendar display. So that's what we're going to work on. So you can ask me anything about Python, Django, or web development if you've got questions, and I'd be happy to answer them. Before we get started, I want to thank my patrons, Rob and Rupert and Abdulaziz, Patrick, Mark, and Eric for contributing. And if you want to catch up with me, there's a variety of ways you can do so. There's my website is above, and I have a mailing list where whenever I post a new article, I send out to the mailing list as well. I'm also on Twitter as MB Lehman, so if you want to connect with me there, you're welcome to do that. And there's a Discord link below as well. If you've got some questions that won't fit in a tweet, but you'd like to chat about them, I'm happy to do that there too. That being said, though, let's get into the actual code for this project. So I'm continuing on this round of user feedback from my spouse. My spouse is the primary customer of this application, and she gave me a lot of stuff to work on. And I'm on the last item for this user feedback round, which is adding this concept of break days to the application. Breaks will permit my children to take vacation, and all of that kind of stuff, and have it be tracked in the app. If that functionality wasn't there, then all of the scheduling stuff that I built in would just kind of slam right into my family, and there'd never be any opportunity to take breaks. So last time I added the modeling for this school break concept, and I started working through the extra bits. After the stream was over, I changed some of the models based on some of the stuff that I saw as I was putting it together and starting to put it in practice. Things that weren't going to go well. The biggest change is the previous incarnation of the model that you might have seen if you joined last time was a single break day had a day attribute. It could account for one day. And I changed that to be now a range. It's got a start date and an end date. That had a whole bunch of implications for creating these break days, because suddenly now I have to check that the ranges don't overlap, and there was all sorts of extra logic that I did. If you want to see that, you're welcome to do so. This code is up on GitHub. It's at MB Lehman Homeschool, and you can check out the changes I made. But what we're going to work on tonight is the ability to view those breaks in a calendar that I've been working on. So I needed a way to present the school year from a calendar kind of view, and let's bring up the app to look at it here. And I wanted a way that had like a information dense, rich kind of view of the calendar. And the method that I found, it is an interesting style. It puts every month on a single line, and actually let's take a look at it. And what I observed about this is, so this is my work so far. And what I like about this view is that it has the entire school year in what amounts to one screen's worth of content. Like everything fits in here. I looked at all these other implementations for calendars, and you could get blocks for different calendars, but then you might be able to see like 3 months at a time, and I just wasn't feeling it. Hey, welcome. Good to see you. Thanks for joining in. So this calendar view has a couple attributes going for it. You can see from the top of the school year that I've arbitrarily like kind of set the start date and end date at different points to make sure that I'm checking the boundary conditions of this. So all of these like grayed out dates are things that aren't part of the school year. Same is true of the last month. There's only a single day. In fact, I was checking the boundary condition for what if you only have one day in the month, and it still works out because of some of the logic I did. So I put all this logic into a file that we can take a look at. And it's not over here. I was doing some other stuff. I made this year calendar. Unfortunately, as things work out in many standard libraries, the name calendar is already taken. It's part of the standard library. So I had to come up with another name for the class that I'm building. But if we bring up the appropriate view file and do a comparison, we can see that what I'm doing is in the context data, I'm adding some calendar context to everything. What are my thoughts on Docker and Django used on development deployment? That's a good question, Python Goodbot. It's a yeah, I like that you put quick in quotes. I think if you already know how to do Docker and you're okay with some of the restrictions that I see that come with Docker, go for it. It's nice to have a Docker image. The output of it is a nice artifact to move around, and it does kind of make some aspects of deployment much easier, especially if you're working on a team. Those are it's good to have that. It makes it reproducible. You're not dealing with developer A has their environment set up with this, and the other one has their environment set up with this, and neither of them has a working environment. So I do that at work. Docker works well there. So what restrictions? I'm primarily speaking about, like, I've had, how do I phrase this? With Docker, it's like an extra layer of stuff. When I'm running this server right now, for example, this is running Heroku local. It's running a local process on my operating system. So I interact with it like any other process, which means, for example, if I put in a debugger, it's going to stop and put in a debugger right there within the server, the testing tooling and everything. Like, all of that stuff is going to be local. And so things like using a debugger become very easy, very natural. They'll do what you expect. With Docker, it's possible to get those same kind of setup, but you have to find the right path to get there. And I don't know how best to describe that in any other way, is that there's just a bit of a extra barrier that, like, everything you have to do is kind of proxied through Docker commands. For example, you might use a tool like, there's a common tool called Docker Compose. Docker Compose gives you a file format where you can sort of put together different services. You compose them together, so it's aptly named, and it's a good tool for building up and starting up quick Docker environments. But anytime you want to actually interact with the Docker container, you have to run. I don't actually have it installed on this Mac, I think, but you have to run something like Docker Compose run and then your command, whatever that, if it was a manage.py, you have to do all of that stuff, because what it has to do, Docker, the way it works is the container image is just like a template of what to start from. And when Docker runs, it creates an actual container instance. And so that's the running version of this. Yeah, that's kind of it. The having an intermediary between me as the developer and the thing I'm building, it acts as a barrier. And, like, you can get tools that will account for basically all of those conditions, I think. Especially with, I know there's some really solid stuff from VS Code, for example, that makes working with Docker containers way easier from that regard. And if you're willing to go through that setup, Docker can be great, because it does make the deployment side of this, it does make that easier, because the thing that you're deploying is the same in every environment. I guess I get kind of some of that same benefit in a sense from, PyCharm's got some good stuff as well. I get a lot of that same benefit because I'm using Heroku, and Heroku is kind of like, it kind of makes, it's not a container, but it bundles together all of my app, and I think they call it a slug is their version of this. And it works just on their infrastructure, but I get, by designing my application in a certain way, it's actually very similar to Docker. So if I ever wanted to switch to Docker at some point, like maybe I found that the infrastructure needs at Heroku just weren't meeting what I needed, or had scaling and it was getting too expensive. None of that's the case right now because I have no users yet, no active users anyway. And but if I ever reach that point, switching it to Docker would be a much easier thing to do because I'm already using what's referred to as a 12-factor application. So if you ever go to 12factor.net, there's this discussion of a 12-factor app. And one of the points on this 12-factor app is all about configuration and how you can build apps in a way that work well and wherever they're put, because they depend on their environment rather than having stuff baked in. So I think there's not a lot of difference between what I'm doing versus a Docker setup. There are some differences that I could benefit from. So like, I've got some downsides with my setup right now. A big downside is, if I look at list out my files here, I am literally using, I don't know if you can see what I'm highlighting down at the bottom here. I'm using SQLite 3 to act as my local database. And that's okay. It's quick. It helps that Django starts with this. Like I literally changed nothing about the Django database setup to get going. But if I ever wanted to take advantage of more advanced features of Postgres, which is what Heroku runs, I would have to deal with that in my local environment. I'd have to have Postgres running locally on my machine. And then, if I ever worked on a team, that person would have to do the same thing. So Docker Compose and Docker smooths all that over so that if you need a Postgres container, you can add that very easily from an image, and you can get the satisfaction of knowing that it's going to be fully isolated, and what I start up and what you start up would be exactly the same because it would work from the same image. So all of that's great. Again, it kind of comes down to, I'm a team of one. I know how to deploy to Heroku, and I've got a path to migrate to to a container setup if I needed to in the future. You can't do SQLite on production, and you wouldn't want to anyway, because the way SQLite works is only one user. It has a write lock, so only one user can write to it at a time. So there are lots of things in Django that will write to the database. Even logging in, I think, will write to the database because it will update a login timestamp or something like that. So SQLite is definitely not a good choice for a web application server. Even if I had my own cloud infrastructure, I wouldn't pick SQLite there because of that kind of restriction. There's one or two caveats. Yeah, it's like a file you're editing, so it would be really hard to keep that consistent. And they design it so it's intended for embedded stuff and mobile and all of these other use cases that have one individual in mind. So I think it's a good tool, and as long as you pick the right use case, it's a great tool. There is one interesting use of SQLite for web applications that I have seen, though, that's kind of cool. And it depends on if your app is a intentionally read-only kind of application. Then there is a way to use SQLite powerfully to your benefit. And I think, is it Simon? Django Simon, I think it's Willison, I think is his last name. Yeah. So Simon Willison is one of the co-creators of Django, and I'm not going to be able to find it really quickly. It's data something. He has some tool that he's created that is very clever. And what it does, oh shoot, I wish I could find the actual link for you. But what it does is he's essentially bundled SQLite, a data set, into a SQLite database and put the whole thing, storage and all. Is it? Yeah, it might be this one. Anyway, oh yeah, data set. That's the name of it right here. The SETTE spelling here. Anyway, so what he does is he takes a set of data and bundles it into a SQLite database and puts that into a container image and then deploys that to an infrastructure like a Lambda kind of infrastructure where every time you make a request, you get an entire container instance that comes up just for you and then goes down when you're done. In that context, the writing scenario, the problems with SQLite goes away. So if you are able to like bundle your data into an application, then this is a really fascinating application of SQLite. So it kind of freezes a set of data over time. It's a really slick. So if you wanted to go check that out, I definitely recommend it. I think he used it for, the example I recall was something like data set for like trees in San Francisco or something like that, of where trees have been planted in the city, and you could just kind of query for all the trees and figure out what types they were and when they were planted and all the city's information about that. It was an interesting project. I haven't found an application for it myself, but that is one SQLite use case that I think is really interesting. Anyway, so that's my thoughts on Docker. It's a good tool. And it is great for the right scenario, but for my scenario as a single developer deploying to Heroku, it just doesn't fit my needs right now. All right, let's look at a little bit more at this calendar. So I've been building out a calendar. Quick question, right? I've been building out a calendar, and I said that the first part of it, I'm checking for the edge conditions of when the school year starts and finishes. And I had to do a bunch of like calendar logic to put this all together, to get the right dates and get the right set of padding to make this all kind of fit into a single box in a reasonable way. And the big thing is like the first of these always is lining up, although that's a little oddly formatted here with March. I think it might be because of the width of my browser right now. Maybe can't show that properly. I'm gonna need to tweak that. Anyway. What it does is the first lines up with the associated day for that starting week, which is why it kind of has this staggered style at the start. But it has all the information there in a rich way. And what's here presented is, that's like really bugging me. I'm going to resize to see what happens, how big it has to go. Okay, I've got some sizing work to do. The spacing is wrong here. Yeah, I was going to speak to that. So my school year that I have in my sample data, it should be all Saturdays and Sundays are off days for the school year. So I'm going to spread this out. You can't see everything because I know it goes off of my screen, but what I'm noticing is that at a slightly smaller breakpoint with Tailwind, that it's messing up the sizing. So I might need to tighten it up a little. They might just be too wide for what I fit in there, or I might say screw it because y'all are. I'm artificially constraining my screen size for the stream, and I need to check my wife's experience. If it works for her, then I'm not going to fret about it right now. But you can see when I've expanded the size out, when it's at this largest breakpoint, all the columns line up as Saturday and Sunday are taken off. So that's why those are grayed out. And they're not selectable because they're not actually school days for the year. So I built this this calendar display, and the next thing I need to do is I've got this school break model, and I want to put breaks on the calendar. And breaks can be a yep, you're right. It'll totally be an issue if I'm coming in from smaller form factors. I don't know that I'm gonna worry about that at this stage because I'm targeting a user of one who I know my exact device specifications. So it's the smaller size MacBook Pro, and so it's a little bit smaller screen than I've got here, but I think it'll be enough for that biggest breakpoint. But I do want to fix that ultimately in the future because this looks wonky. At any rate, so the next thing to do is to put in these school breaks on the calendar. And the school breaks, I want them to look like a pill style. So it'll be rounded on one side of the start range and rounded on the other. And if any days are in the middle, it'll just be a continuation, just a big long pill. And then if there are two, there's nothing in the middle. Front end shenanigans. And if there's one case where it's a single day, I just want it to be just a circle. Okay, just like these the highlights and this is the current day. I want it to be that, but I want to pick a different color. The breaks are probably going to be in some shade of blue, I would imagine. In fact, I'm going to turn off flux so I can actually see, because that's going to be important. As I've discovered on streams, like things that seemed like they weren't appearing just turned out I had flux on and it was getting late at night and I just couldn't see the orange and yellow stuff. Okay, so I have a break. Let me check if I have any breaks, because I killed the server. Hold on. I'm working on Mac OS. That's the environment that I'm on right now. Yeah, I guess I hide a lot of my Chrome. You can't actually see it, but if I drop the window down, you can hear the Mac buttons and stuff. So my wife and I are in very similar operating environments. They're just, my computer's a bigger one because I had it for work for a long time. All right, let's check that and see if there are any breaks in there. And I want to put in, if there aren't, well, okay, good. So I want to add three different breaks, or maybe four. I want to test a few conditions as we get this stuff displayed. I want to have a break. Whoops, I don't want to do it through here. Let's go back over here, because this will actually associate it with the proper school year. So I want a break that is a single day. So let's say July 4th, 2020. 7/4/2020. And this field is optional. So I'm going to leave the descriptions alone because we don't need them. So the single day, that'll be the example of the circle. And then let's get a day or a couple of days. And we'll pick, I don't know. Okay. We're going to pick 11/1/2020 to, wow, hold on. I need to check that these are actually on ranges that make sense. So we have July 4th. Well, shoot, that's a Saturday. So it wouldn't be reasonable to have a break then. Okay. School breaks, we'll go edit that one. And we'll put it on the 3rd. Just like a observed day. All right. And I guess y'all don't really actually need to see, well, I need to see the chat. I'm going to cover up the chat if I move that too big. So we've got July 3rd will be a circle. And let's pick a different range. Let's say May 12 and 13. 5/12/2020 and 5/13. Oops. 2020. Yeah, that's a good question. That's a good point. I've thought about that. The challenge is that my spouse wants these button, like if you see I'm hovering, it already has a link spoken for it. So this will take her directly to the daily view for that particular day. And I think she'd rather have the functionality to go straight to the day rather than create a break there, because it'll be more common activity to like, oh, I'm going to my calendar for that day. But it's a good thought. Okay, so we've got 5/12 and 13. Let's get a range for a 3-day range. Actually, let's do some in the future, because we've got this like light gray for stuff that's already passed. And let's do a range that like spans over a weekend, because that could be interesting. So let's say 24 through 29 in September. 9/24/2020, 9/29/2020. So that gets us a large range. we've got a single day, a 2-day, which is, both of the sides of the pill just directly connected. We've got a pill that's long with segments in the middle that goes over weekend days. So that's all goodness. And then I think one more use case that we might want to have is like something that spans from one month to another. So let's say from October 30th to November 2nd. Why not? So 10/30/2020 to 11/2/2020. Okay, so that'll give us some breaks that hopefully we get far enough that we can actually see these things, because we've got some work to do before we can even actually start to put them on the calendar into the display. So how am I going to do this? When we look at this view, that's the right place to start. The view itself is taking self.object, this is a school year detail view, so that will correspond to the school year that we're looking at. In this case, it'll correspond to the 2020 school year. And we also need the current date. That's how we know to put the circle here and do all the calculation relative to that. So that explains that aspect. Those are the only two pieces that go in right now. And you can see in the query set up above here that I'm doing a prefetch on the breaks. So the school is already pulling all of the break data in and doing that query. So we have that data available and we need to now use it. But this is where we're going to have to start dealing with some complications, because as I am processing, oh shoot. Okay, well, carry on. I think it'll be okay. I'm just starting to think about like the way I built this out, and specifically that case that wraps from months. That's going to be really intriguing. But the way this works is the calendar has this build method on it, and the build method takes does some current date stuff and gets the right ranges to make sure that there's the right comparisons, and it builds out months, and it's a bunch of data structures. A dictionary data structure that kind of loops over things. And we can look at the template to pull it all together so you can see what I'm talking about. I use a flex box, which accounts for some of that weirdness in sizing. A table might have been a better choice to keep it rigid, even if it breaks the size of the available space, which I may still do. But for today, for now, we've got this. Nope, that's not the right one. Here it is, this chunk right here, from this line to this line. So the entire calendar so far is wrapped up in this structure. I build a fairly complicated to a degree data structure of a nested set of dictionaries. The outermost dictionary contains all of the months in the school year and the set of header labels for how many MTWTFSS times we do this all the way across. So that's the outermost dictionary. And then within that, there is for each, in the months dictionary, it's a list. And each month is itself a dictionary. And that thing contains dates. And really the core of it is I'm adding extra data to each date so that I can know how to display a property properly. So we'll see in the code in a second that I added some attributes so that I can quickly say, add this color if this is today, if it's in the past, if it's, whatever. All of those get bundled in here. And I do some extra funniness for whether this is a link or not, depending on whether it's in the school year. So that is how this template is built up. So I think the way I want to get to even adding breaks to the final calendar output is to first go to the calendar builder part, this year calendar stuff, and make sure that breaks get incorporated in here. So as each day is processed, I will essentially add break information to that day. And here's where you can see, like, we can trace this down. So here's the build method. It loops over all of the months. That's essentially what this while loop is doing. And it appends a call to build month. Build month then does some calendar math to do all of the stuff that I showed you, and fills out the right calendars and fills in all of the dates for that month. And so it calls build date. Build date is where all of the attributes are applied, and that's all of that. Hey, Anthony, congratulations on becoming a partner. I see you got a fancy, cool checkbox there. Okay, so we need to get breaks in there, and how are we going to do that? We have to use the school year, which we have, and I want to be able to, like, each date that's going to be passed in there is provided here. So I want to do like a query on the school year, and I want to ask the school year, is today a break? Because the school year is going to essentially denormalize all of these break model instances and keep track of every single individual date. And the reason I want to do this is because the processing is date by date. I don't have to like do a bunch of inner nested loops, because the brute force way to do this would be able to say, essentially, when I get to a date, go through all of the school breaks for just that one date, see if any of them have a range that matches the date, and then if so, find out information about that date. Because if you think about that, it would be iterating through every date in the school year, and then for every date doing another iteration on every school break, and that's not a good way to go about it. So instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create some helper methods on the school year that will essentially take all of the breaks and denormalize and cache all of that data for the length of the HTTP call, so that I can do a dictionary lookup on that date and say, hey, school year, if there is a break on this date, give me that break, so that by the time I'm doing the building, that query for the current date will be a dictionary lookup, which has a much better performance characteristic. So essentially, I'm getting an ON cost. If you know big O notation, I'm doing ON by denormalizing the list first, and then a big O for iterating through all the dates, rather than ON squared, because by going through all the dates with nested loops. If you don't know big O notation and then it made no sense and you didn't do computer science, and that's okay. Don't worry about it. Just know it'll be faster, is the TLDR. Okay, so what I want this to look like. So it's going to be kind of a query method, and I'm going to work by assuming that the method is there from the start. So what can it be? We could ask for a break. So it's a school break. This is the challenge with using break as the name too, because it's not like I can say break, because that's a reserve word in the language. I didn't like the way I was taught it either at university. To be honest with you, Python CodeBot, it didn't sit well with me, and I don't think I really understood it until way longer. Somebody had to break it down to me, like, if you've got nested loops, you've got ON squared kind of stuff. I don't know why it took that long to click, but that's what it did. So I think I want to say school break is something like, I want to do something like this. School break, and then take the school year, and then say get, I don't need to repeat school, maybe just get break, and ask it for the current date. And I think by doing this, I could make this, so the return type of this, I could have it be an optional school break. And then, I'm not normally big on doing optional, but I did add just enough MyPy to the system so that I can do optional and it can keep me honest, because my biggest problem with returning none from methods is you forget to handle the none. And if I have MyPy in place, it at least kind of adds that little bit of static checking that is good. You had an old professor. I had yeah, my professor was good. I don't know. I guess my brain wasn't ready for that when I was in school years ago at this point. So we are going to take the school break, and we're going to, if we get a school break back, then we add some information to this date object that we can then render in the calendar. And if we don't get a break back, obviously we don't. But as I mentioned, there are basically like 4 states that a break can be in, and or a day can be relative to a break. If a break is a single day, then we're going to get that circle shape because it's both. The entire break will appear on the calendar as just like this, as a circle. Again, probably blue, but it'll appear that shape. But we also need to know. So that's like one of the 4 states that I see. So that's a single view of a break, single break, I'll call it. And then we have another style that has no middle. It's just the end caps of the pill. And so we have the start of a break, and we have the end of a break. And then if we have a longer section, we have break middles. So all of these need to map to this display in this calendar. And I think I'm going to, there's a couple of places I could put that logic. I think I'm kind of torn because there's an argument that says I can put it in this calendar, and that's it. Like, that's the only place that might use it. So, because nothing else is needing to know about these different boundaries, because none of them are trying to display it. Alternatively, I could put that kind of logic in the school break itself. So if I get a school break back and I pass it a current date, it could basically answer its own question of which part of this particular school break is it? Is it a single, start, end, or middle? So that could be useful in other scenarios. And then, so those are the 2 big options that I can think of. I'm leaning a little bit towards putting it in the calendar for now. And if I discover that I'm going to need to have that kind of behavior of determining which portion of a break it belongs to, then I could extract that out of this calendar and put it in the school break model. So I think I'm going to go that way because I think it'll keep the logic all bundled and clustered in here, and then it also will keep my model file a little simpler. So this is what I'm going to go for, and this is, if I run this, my other problem here is I have not written any test code for this yet, which is shame on me, because I did this kind of as a spike of, is this going to work? And I did clean it up and I did some refactoring, but sadly I don't have any tests for this yet. But we can test the pieces, this get break model, and confirm that that's going to work, and then poke on this. And I think offline I'm going to build the actual unit test. Y'all don't care about, I presume you don't really care too much about me testing all the edge cases of building a calendar. It's probably not exactly riveting streaming, although I'm not sure how much building model methods is either, but here you are. Okay, so let's go to the school year, and let's go to the models file for schools where the school year is. And this is where we're going to add the method here. And so I'm going to add a getBreak method, and it's going to take a date, as I said. So the date, what do I want to, again, Python has taken all the good names. I can't just use date because I'm going to import that thing to actually have a real date, and that's not so great. So we could say get break the date. I don't know. Break date. I'm not sure. None of those are feeling that great to me, but I'll start there. And so this is going to return an optional school break is what we're going for. So let's get that to pass. Now I am going to write unit test here. So this is just me mocking up the method interface at this point. In fact, let's comment that out and close this for now, because we'll return to that later. And let's bring up the school's test models file, because that's what we're going to need. And my play is complaining, or something's complaining. School break is defined later in this file, so I think I need to use quotes to get the MyPy syntax to be happy. Okay. We have the interface. We can go to the school year. Is this the school year? Yep. And we'll start testing this get break thing. So there are going to be there are going to be really two cases to check for, I think. Test has school break. So the case where it actually returns a break, and then a case where it doesn't, right? There's probably also boundary conditions where I could check if it's inside the school year, but I don't think that's really any different from having no break. So a date can return a school break, an existing school break. It's probably doesn't need to be said, but I'm going to say it anyway. And let's see, test no school break will be another test, and this one will say a date with no break is a null result. I don't know. Crabby docstring. This one's, sometimes the docstrings are self-evident, but sometimes they're not. So let's write some tests. So we're going to build a school year, and we're going to actually need a real school year. So I'm not going to build. I'm going to use the create call. So we just need any old school year should do. In fact, for this first test, because I'm using a factory, I can make a school break because it has a foreign key to a school year. So we know this will be the right relationship. So we'll say school break factory, and then we're going to call. So then I'll put it in a local variable just so it reads a little more clearly. So the school year is equal to school break dot school year, and then we're going to say actually I'm going to change this name because we're going to run into like name collision here. So we've got the expected school break, and we're going to get the actual school break out of here. And to do this, we'll pass in, what will we call this with? We'll say school year is equal to, school year get break, and then we'll call the expected school break start date, because that'll guarantee that this will have a match. And then we want to assert that the school break is equal to the expected school break. All right, now none of this, well, I guess this method does exist. We did that part right. I already did the method signature, but it has no implementation yet. So get a break date, get a school break if the date is contained in the school break, in the break. That's what we're really checking. But again, I want this to be, I don't want to have to loop through all the breaks, because the naive solution here would be to say, like, for school break in self.breaks.all, which is the name that I have for this to get access to all the breaks. And then if school break, so let's do the brute force one to see if we can get it. If school break less than or equal, school break start date less than or equal to break date, which is less than or equal to, oops, no, that's right, school break end date, then we want to return the school break. And if it doesn't find it in any of those for loops, then, or any of those loop iterations, then it's going to return none. Okay, this should actually pass. But I don't want this, because I think, like I said, it's every time that gets called, and it's going to be called hundreds of times, it's not going to go well. Like, it'd be okay, but I think we can do better. So now that we have a passing test, we can actually work with this to see if we can improve it. So what I really want to do is have the school breaks, like, I want to have an intermediate thing where I can essentially do, instead of this stuff, I want to be able to say return, it's actually going to be a one-liner, self school breaks by date, and then I want to do a get on the break date. That's what I want. That's the implementation that I want. So this is going to be a property that I'm going to build on the school year, which will return a dictionary, and I will probably do a cached property so that any future calls to it are always already going to have the break. And this is all okay because I'm doing full page loads on here. So even though I'm caching this on this model instance, it's not like this is a long-lived process. So no one can go off and add a school break in the time frame when someone would be asking for information about the school breaks. You'd have to switch pages to do that. And so all that stuff would be cleared out. So we can put that there, and we can say, for the moment, we'll just do a regular property. But this is going to get called over and over again, so I don't really want the regular property. I want a cache property. So school breaks by date is what we want. And the implementation of that is going to be, well, this is going to be a little interesting, actually, because we have to make multiple entries. Yeah, this will have some interest to it. Let's see. Get the school breaks grouped by the dates. So the return, all right. So let's put a data structure, start it. We'll call it breaks by date. And that's going to be a dictionary. And MyPy is going to complain at me because I don't have a typeset. And I don't, do I really care to tell them? Sure. Let's do, it's going to be a dict of date is the key, and school break is the value. But I haven't brought in dict yet. So let's bring in dict from typing. I'm looking forward to future versions of Python where you don't have to do that. You can use actual, just lowercase d dict. And I haven't done date either, so let's do this a little differently. At work we bring in date times and date, but like import them using from. But actually, like, my personal preference is to use just import datetime and then have a little bit more namespace. So let's change this now to datetime.date. That should be correct. And I'm surprised it's not complaining about school break. Maybe it's complaining that this error might be masking that. Okay, so we've got a dictionary that we're going to go through, and now we can say for school break in self breaks.all. That's the thing that we want to do, and we need to create an entry for every one of these. So we have to loop over every day. So we can, what's the rate? Let's say current date is equal to school break dot start date. And that's good. And then we can say, this will be a while loop that I think we needed to do, because I'm trying to populate this dictionary. So we'll have a while loop. So while current date is less than the school break end date. Nope, that's not going to work because I also need the end date. So less than or equal to. And then I want to, before I even write the body, I want to make sure I terminate, make sure I modify this logic, because it has to have something to actually bump this up, or else it's not going to work. So we're going to give it a date time. We're going to add on a date time delta of days equal 1. Okay. So right now this whole thing is not doing anything. In the end, we're going to return breaks by date. That should make that stop complaining. And okay, if I run this, the test is still going to fail because we're not adding anything to breaks by date yet. So, but at least it should return none and not like blow up spectacularly, I think. Yeah. Okay, so what's happening is this dictionary remains empty. There's no processing that happens, but it didn't like infinitely loop. So it went over the break and it did everything right. So what we really want to do now is we want to add to the dictionary. We want to say breaks by date, current date is equal to the school break, or set it equal to the school break. So now we're populating this dictionary with all of the break dates. If I run the test passes. Okay, that doesn't actually gain me much yet, because every time I'm calling this property, I'm recalculating all of this stuff. So it's actually probably slower at this point. So we're going to bring in something called cached property, and I believe I have an example of it, and I need it because I don't remember where to import it from. So Django utils functional. Okay, let's go to the top. From Django utils functional import cache property. And let's go back to our property. And cache property does exactly what it sounds like. You call the property, and whatever returns gets cached. So future calls to that property do not do the same, all of the implementation. It just returns whatever was returned by the system. And I guess since I've took the time to add on this type information here because it was required, I can probably take that and put it up in the type signature. Let's do that. Okay. I wonder if it'll let me delete this now. Oh, interesting. I see why its school break is complaining here, but it wasn't complaining here. So this is I'm learning here. So it looks like the fact that this is a class method. So the method signature is actually like defined and imported, done at import time. And MyPy is telling me, like, if you try to do this right now, Python's going to blow up because school break hasn't been defined by this time. But when it was in the method body, that execution won't happen till later. And by the time the execution happens, school break, which is defined later in this file, will have been defined. So that's an interesting difference for why the first instance of us creating that did not need the quotes, but the later one did. And now notice as well that by putting it as the return type, and probably in combination with other analysis that MyPy was able to do, I no longer needed to annotate the actual local dictionary that's created here. Okay, so we're going to delete that temporary code. And let's run the test again to make sure I'm still being honest. And so we've got cache property. And so now when this thing gets called, it can get called over and over again, and it's only going to be calculated once. So I think that's good news. So we have this get break is now calling this essentially hidden data structure. In fact, let's do a little tweak here to make sure that stays kind of as hidden data by making it an underscore property. So it's not like I don't want users of this model, which would be me. So just want a little reminder of, hey, this probably wasn't meant to be like a public thing. There's an API that you should be using to get this. Okay, so let's write the other test. The other test is going to take, this time, just a school year. And we can take a school year factory, and then we can say, let's do the school year's start date. And I know that there's not going to be any data there because we didn't create a break. And so we can say assert school break is none. So that should return none. Okay, we've got this whole file is still passing. So we have the toolbox, the tools in our toolbox to work with. Okay, now I think we can return to the calendar thing and flesh out the implementation there. And again, I'm not doing the test tonight for this. I will probably regret that later, but that's okay. So we've got school year get break. It asks for the current date, and now we have a school break attribute. Now I think what I'm going to have to do is, I've got all of this going in a single return, and I don't think I'm going to be able to get away with that because I have to put information in there based on the presence of a school break or not. So let's change this to a local variable called date data, and then we can return it as date data, not date data. Man, that's tough. And let's put the school break down below because that's where we're going to be adding the stuff about it. It's additional information. So we're going to say if school break, then we need to add extra information to this date. Maybe I can get away with having a single data structure. Let me think on this. Yeah, I'm going for it. So let's actually undo all that stuff I just did. I lied. We're going to keep this, try and do a single return. And we're going to say date is break. And that's where we're going to add whether it's a break or not. And we know that it's a break or not by whether a school break was returned. So is break is if school break is not none. That's the condition. Okay, so let's I wonder if we should go to our template just to have something to like look at while we're doing this. I think that's a good start. So we'll go in there and let's block in the UI, and then we can do the refinement on whether something is the circle or the ends or all of that stuff. This is just to see, like, did we get all of the breaks in there? Are they going to display properly? And I guess we'll also get to see if I really screwed up the SQL queries, because I did do a prefetch. So the data from, I don't think there'll be extra queries. I guess we'll take a look. So let's return to the template. And how do we want this to display? I said I wanted this to be like a background blue. So it's going to be in this area here to choose its styling. And it might just be an extra if clause. Question is, like, do I want today? You know, sometimes now we're getting to the point where like ordering starts to matter. Like if I wanted today to always remain yellow, even if it's in the middle of a break, that might be confusing. I might actually want it to be, I might want a break display to like overlap that, because if my spouse was to look at it and she looks at the calendar and sees the current day as yellow, but it's like not what she would expect, then maybe that's not the right thing. So maybe a break should go first. But let's just try something first to see how it goes. So let's say elif the month date is break. And we will do this for the moment. We'll just change it to blue. We'll see how that comes out. And I just refreshed the chat by accident. So, oops. All right, page is loading. Loading. Oh, would you look at that? Cool. So we're pretty close. These are, there's clearly not there's like some highlighting stuff that's not going on, but we can correct that. We can add the extra styling. So it's a matter of like, now what I want to do is, you know, of all of these things that are on display, only this one is correct because it's a single day and it's a circle. I want this to be a pill, and the way I'm going to do that is by changing the rounded part. So, but we need to ask more. We need to add more information to the code before we can do that. Oh, bugger. All right, here's where I goofed. The return from the get break is I could do this in a couple of ways. One puts some burden on the model. It gives it's forcing it to do what I said I wasn't going to do, which is like no information about whether it's single, beginning, middle, or end. The other is that when I'm doing display stuff, I can look forward and backward in time. I'm not making any sense. I'm sorry. Let me. The problem is that when it gets time to display this, all I've done is ask for give me the break, and I don't. And it returns the break. It returns a school break. But that, in order to like know, is it right? Okay. I'm getting there. Sorry, folks. I was having trouble, but I'm realizing I do have enough information to answer this question. Okay. So let's return to the code and build this in. So we're going to call this break style for now. And it's going to return a string. So we'll say self get break style, and it will accept a school break. Okay, and then we'll create this private method, get break style. We'll take a school break. And remember, the school break can be none, so we need to be careful here. So we'll start with the guard clause that says if the school break is none, then just return an empty string, because it's not being called, so it doesn't really matter. So that's that condition. Now, let's go through the 4 states. So we've got if school break this is going to need 2 values. It needs to know where it is as well. Okay. I promise I'll get there. Struggling with this logic for some reason. So the first condition is like a single condition. If the school break start date is equal to the school break end date, there's no point in doing any comparison. It's a single day. So we're going to return single, like that. Then, so now we're going to, I'm making an assumption here. I'm assuming that the current date that gets passed in is part of the school break. And so we can either say if the current date, let's get the start and end. So those are the easier conditions. If the current date is equal to the school break start date, then we've got the start condition, right? Similarly, if we have the current break end date is equal to the current date, then we have the end condition. And then finally, if well, I guess the only one that's left is the middle. So maybe we can just assume if you're not one of those other things, if you're not either the one of the caps or just a single day, then you must be a middle. That actually works out pretty nicely. I'm wondering if these should be a list of elifs. No, I think it needs to check all of them in order. Because we don't want to, like, if this fails, skip down to the middle. We want to go through the list. You got to check, are you this type? Are you this type? Are you this type? So there's got to be a few checks in order. So this is, I think, right. And there's probably a nicer style to do this. Maybe some kind of lookup table. I don't really know. This will work. And I might clean it up later. Something, I'm looking at that code and it's reading to me as repetitive in some way. And maybe it's just that I rarely write code that is that kind of simple in its condensed form. So that's what's looking off to me, but I'm not really sure. Okay, but let's return to our template now. And we want to leave, I want the blue to stay. So that part's not changing. I'm not crazy about the color though. Let's make it a little darker, see how that looks. Did I hit refresh? No. Okay. That's a little darker. I still don't know if it feels right. It's the color palette that I'm using, I think, is either 600 or 700. Well, anyway, I'll get feedback from my spouse on that if it actually looks the way she wants it to. So we've got rounded full, but rounded full is only for the single day. So rounded is what's determining the border radius in Tailwind. So we have, let's change this. We've got, now that we know that we're in a break, we can check about the break style. So we can say if month date break style is equal to single, then we want the rounded full. We want rounded full. So let's see what that looks like. Hopefully, if all goes according to plan, this one will stay rounded and the others will turn into squares. Sweet. That's good. And now, what's next? We can do, now we're on the other side of this where we only care about a single condition, so we can do elifs for these other ones. So if the break style is equal to the start, then we care about the left side, right? The left side correct. So let's go over to Tailwind and see how to apply rounded to just the left top and bottom. Oh, they redid this. Okay, rounded corners. All right, redid their docs. It's all good. Rounded full, rounded full. But I want rounded on just a couple of sides. Because in order to get the circle, they had a square shape, or a square shape that they made a circle. So I was hoping to use right and left. Well, let's look through the utilities. It might be on here and I'm just not there yet. Yeah, okay, good. So we want rounded left full, I believe is what we're looking for, because we're looking for the top and bottom left radius, and here it is, rounded left full. So we'll say rounded left full. Let's refresh our page to take another look at it. All right, so we've got half of our pill looking good over here. And well, I guess middle, we actually don't even need to list middle. That's interesting side effect that I didn't think about. Because just changing this to rounded right full, we'll get the other side. And that gets exactly what I want. And this is what I desire. Like, see this one, this is the case I wanted to show on purpose because I wanted to see what this would look like if it's squared off when it crosses over months. And I think that that's right. I think that's what I want. Okay, so the other question is, what should we do about like hover? So I could do this. I could say, let's try this. If we're on a break day, we'll add a hover to it, which I guess we can put up here. Hover, then we want to do BG blue, I don't know, 400. Okay. Oh, that's looking pretty good. It's a little weird on these ones because these aren't actually clickable. That's intentional because they go with these holidays, or sorry, these weekdays. Again, sorry about the weird styling. These are all line up in the right circumstance. So that's that is good though. Overall, I think this is pretty much exactly the effect I'm going for. So that's cool. That was actually not as hard as I thought it would be. I'm trying to think if there's anything else I want to do with this, or just might be a time to declare victory and call it a night. Let's poke at the sizing stuff just a little bit. See if I can make it fit on a smaller screen without being like completely claustrophobic feeling. Or not claustrophobic, but just crammed. So how did I do this? I set the actual cells here and width 6. Did they make a width 5? I know they have I know for certain there's width 4. There is a width 5. Okay, well, let's try that one. I think I skipped width 5 because I assumed that it maybe didn't exist. That just looks so packed. I don't really like it. I think even like the line, I don't know, line height or something like that is, I don't know how well you can see this the way I'm seeing it, but you can tell that it's thinner. It's not a full circle anymore. So it didn't quite go correctly. Or maybe that's because, maybe I did this wrong. Maybe I should be adding height 5 as well to make it like force, not what I intended. Okay, that's why it doesn't work, because these numbers, I guess, are taller. What is that width? They're taller than the default. So this width 6 maybe is the height of the text base. So look, this is 1.5 rem. So let's see the text. Let's go to the text heights. Text base. Text base says it's 1 rem. I don't know how that works. It's surprising to me. Okay. Clearly though, whatever the case, the 5 sizes is no good. So let's return it to the 6. It's off. I wonder if I wonder how far I'd have to go in order to get this screen size to look okay. Or if I would have to switch it to a table in order to guarantee. And then if there's like overflow, because that's what I'm dealing with right now. I'm dealing with these things are overflowing. And in the context of overflow, they seem to be like crunching the flex box. So the options are, I can make my first column skinnier, the column with the months, but I think what if I do that? I think I tried that, and it's going to mess with the September, for example. Oh, it didn't even solve the problem. So yeah, it's not even worth exploring. Oh, that's just, never mind. It is worth exploring. I didn't adjust the right thing. I got to adjust it in 2 places. So I got to change it here with the header labels and change it here with the month names. So this works, I guess. Let's see. September is the longest month. And okay, that could work, because even if I have a year where the September 1st is a Monday, it's the only case that this is going to come up, it still is going to space out like that. It's all right. That works. It's a little bit tighter over here. It doesn't give as much padding, but that's probably okay, actually. Kind of brings it closer to the month a little bit and tightens the table length up. I'm going to resize it. You won't be able to see this very much. I just want to make sure that, okay, it still looks reasonable. As I'm looking at it like full screen now, I set this thing to be a max width so that the the yellow lines don't span all the way across, and it still looks pretty good there too at the larger breakpoint. Okay, I think that's a good spot to call it for the night. Let's take a look at what we did to give you a sense of what we managed to get with just not too much code actually. Oh, I didn't. Sorry, let's do one more thing. Let's check on the queries to make sure I didn't screw that up. We'll look at bring up the debug toolbar again and check out, there are only 6 queries. And because I did a prefetch, it's doing the breaks first. And there's like, the property is called later, but because the stuff's already prefetched and I'm working on the same school year, I think it's doing the right thing. Great. So we didn't make any queries worse. And the cached stuff was only calculated once. So I think it's about as optimized as I'm going to reasonably get it. So I feel good about the way this is coming out all over. Okay, now we can look at the diff and see what we actually did. So we used a bit of type checking, type hinting tonight to make sure that I capture the fact that this is an optional. And the reason that I use optional and take advantage of MyPy is to force myself to consider the none case, because when the stuff is returned, I can get none back from this method, and I want to have guard code that says, are you dealing with none? Because dealing with a none type error, if you've done Python for any reasonable length of time, you've probably encountered one. They're annoying. It's the same as the null pointer exception in Java, and it's just irritating. So having tools that check that and say, like, you need to do this or else you're going to potentially run into this error is a good thing to have. So that's what the optionals are for. And we've got the get break method that works on the break date. And again, we built this property, this cache property, to take advantage of caching and to denormalize this data so that the attribute lookup based on date is a single lookup that is very quick. So all the stuff is pre-computed in looping through this for loop pretty quickly. And I think it all works out reasonably well there. And then we added a couple of tests to make sure that those are covered and incorporated the break. We didn't have to touch any of the rest of the calendar building, which is really nice. But we incorporated that break stuff into the date building aspect of this. So the complex data structure that I built up, all the logic gets built and baked into the actual display view. I'm realizing that there's another piece that I'm missing that I'll just do it later. I think Python Codebot mentioned, like, what if you click on those and create breaks from there? I do want to be able to, like, if there is a break, to have that be a case where you can edit the break. So if there's already an existing break, someone should be able to click on it and change the size of it or delete it or whatever. I want that. That's the only way that I'm going to provide access to that. So that's actually a piece of functionality that's definitely missing, but it's okay that we don't do it here. It turned out that setting the break style of deciding whether it's the single start, middle, end was not terribly difficult to do. And then we made some adjustments here that added that stuff in, which turned out to be a couple of if conditions, which is, all in all, I'm very satisfied with how little code this took. I was afraid it was going to be kind of complex and really make the view code pretty gnarly, but it didn't turn out that way. So I think that's where I'm going to call it for the night. The next time that I stream, I may have quite a bit to tell. Actually, my spouse has decided she wants to start planning for the school year, so that means this stuff's going live soon, at least for her. And I have a sense that, as soon as you get a real user using it on a regular basis, the feedback will probably be fast and furious for a while. So we're going to either plan to continue to polish this break stuff, or we'll move on to whatever feedback she has that she needs fixed for her purposes. And if none of that is true, if I solve all those problems, which I doubt, then we'll probably get back to doing some of the onboarding work, because ultimately this is a tool for her to start. But I do want this tool to be available to other users. And I'm thinking about onboarding. It's going to be quite a while before I actually get to the point where someone else would use the app aside from my spouse. But I do want to have an eye for that in the future. So I think that's going to bring us to the end. Thank you all for joining in. I do take this content, I post up on YouTube, so if you want to check it out there, you can if you missed anything. There's also past episodes for this application, which I have been building on Twitch essentially from the start. There are things that I do offline, but a lot of it gets done here. And so there's nothing super mysterious that is in this code base that hasn't been presented here. So all of that stuff's on YouTube. You can search for my name, Matt Lehman, and I have a channel up there that posts all the videos. If you have any other questions for me, check out the Discord, like, subscribe, whatever you feel about is the right thing to do, or contact me on Twitter. I'm happy to chat with you. Thank you all for joining in, and I'll see you next time. Take care.